puts up a three. And goal!
Bearcat Blitz. Wonderful to be with everybody in the new year, 2025. We had the end of the year at the start of the week, beginning of the year here to close the week as we are presented by Bet Online right here on Bearcat Blitz. Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to Bet Online today and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV, all one word, for your welcome bonus on that first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. I'm your host, Russ Eltman. He's my co-host across the way there, Neil Meyer from Rivals Cincinnati site, thefrontofficenews.com. I am with Cincinnati Bearcats on SI, coming off of a rough loss for Cincinnati against Kansas State. We broke that down on the Tuesday show fully in depth. A lot of offensive things to work on, namely getting Simas Lukosius open and getting him going once again. It's the biggest thing I think we're going to probably touch on offensively in the preview of the Arizona matchup. An Arizona matchup that is as tight as you could possibly project. Number 23 team in the net in the Wildcats versus the number 25 team in the net in the Bearcats. We don't have a betting spread on this thing yet on betonline.ag, but I would imagine the odds makers there are going to be placing this thing no more than 3 points in favor of the Bearcats. I would imagine it's going to be a very, very tight contest. One of many that we expect to see tight contest wise for the rest of the season. That's in the back half of the show. The first half of the show, though, transfer portal update, the latest on Cincinnati football, the transfer portal happening, some different offers sent out in the past couple days, some additional visits set up, but no new additions have happened so far in the new year. Probably just a matter of time before we get another one, as still expecting, I think Neil and I both, probably 4 to 5 more guys added, given the postseason comments from General Manager Zach Grant and head coach Scott Satterfield. Before we get to all that, though, take a quick break, hear from our great sponsors, and then get into the full show on Bearcat Blitz, this end of the week edition. Neil, getting a look at the football front before we dive back into another game for the Bearcats, their first game of 2025 on the basketball front. Cincinnati has most recently, in the last few days, offered William and Mary, offensive lineman, Cameron Fry, kind of an undersized offensive tackle, trying to get in early with him. You also see some other interesting pop-ups, including Tennessee defensive back Christian Harrison. He's coming to visit the program on January 6th. So this Monday, he will be in town. Tennessee defensive back Christian Harrison. That's if Cincinnati can get to that visit, with him going to Texas A&M, Indiana, and Ole Miss before Cincinnati. So they're kind of the last spot in that come up. And then outside of that, we've had a running back kind of pop up a little bit here. And Tawee Walker, who is scheduling a visit to Cincinnati in the near future, had 864 yards rushing, was the Wisconsin Badgers' top running back last year. And then on top of that, you also have Star Thomas, who we talked about a little bit. That was in the last show. That news had popped up of him being on Cincinnati's radar as well. The Duke running back. The Blue Devils got absolutely shellacked last night against Ole Miss. So far, Neil, just kind of slow builds on these transfer portal fronts and no kind of imminent addition. I think definitely on the table as of right now, but they're keeping their toes in the water with a few guys.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Russ. They're keeping their toes in the water to say. There's a couple guys that they've reached out to. The big one being the defensive back from Tennessee. Obviously, got a slew of visits coming up over the next few days, but it's going to be interesting, Russ, because you and I both know that they are still actively involved within the transfer portal. But
Yeah.
You see a couple more offers go out. William and Mary, offensive lineman, that could be something to keep an eye on. And Cameron Fry could be something to keep an eye on there. Tawee Walker's the biggest one, Russ, that I think garners a lot of interest because he fits the kind of running back that Cincinnati is needing with the loss of Corey Kiner. And I mean, that's a guy who could come in if does decide to commit to Cincinnati, could come in and fight for starting carries right there and could be that 1-2 punch with Evan Pryor set to take on the lead running back role as of right now. And everybody knows Evan Pryor is going to be a guy this season that's going to need somebody to complement him because Evan Pryor is going to need the ball in his hands. Everybody knows that on the forefront there. So if Evan Pryor gets the ball in his hands, we've seen what he is able to do. But to have that the bell cow bruiser back right there in front of him is something that Cincinnati does not have right now on the roster. So if Tawee Walker elects to come to Cincinnati, that will be a huge get for Cincinnati. And then on top of it, you still have plenty of options out there in the transfer portal. Obviously, you're still having some bowl games finish up. I expect some few more names to jump in. But Christian Harrison, I think, is your biggest guy. He's the son of former NFL player Rodney Harrison. So overall, that's going to be your big time target. It looks like he's visiting Texas A&M today, Indiana tomorrow, Ole Miss in the following days, and then Cincinnati right there. So it's a busy weekend for Christian Harrison. It looks like he's going straight from Texas A&M to Indiana to Ole Miss to Cincinnati, all within the
flights.
all within the 4-day period. So it's going to be interesting. But Tawee Walker is definitely a name that keeps an eye on. Obviously, we talked about Star Thomas last week. Tawee Walker is going to be another name to kind of keep an eye on and see what goes on there. Because Scott Satterfield made it known, Russ, back in December when we talked to him and Zach Grant, that they would be looking for a running back potentially in the portal. And here we are. We're starting to see the offers go out. So it's going to be interesting.
Shout out to On3's Pete Nakos. He's broken a lot of this transfer portal commitment visit news. And one of my classmates at Ohio University, we graduated in the same class in Athens a few years ago. Good stuff, him. And he reported the Tawee Walker news of him visiting Clifton in the near future. We don't have a locked in date for Tawee Walker necessarily, but as Neil just laid out, would fit this Cincinnati offense perfectly. Exact type of player they need right now. 5'9", 218 pounds, 864 yards rushing, 10 touchdowns for Wisconsin last year. Transferred there from Oklahoma the year before, so a lot of high pedigree. 782 career offensive snaps. In a bruising running back position that UC just doesn't have that kind of experience at all on the roster right now. So at 74.9 PFF grade, 458 of those 782 snaps last season. So coming off of a really impressive year, I think Tawee Walker would be a really solid option. And then you mentioned Christian Harrison, Neil. Looking at his profile, Harrison, solid production in 2024. He's more of like a slot cornerback, so to speak. He's not going to play on the outside, I would imagine. Wherever he ends up going was mostly in the slot this past season, but had 20 tackles, 1 pass breakup, holds 2 more years of eligibility, and I think would be a nice way to really round out the probable starting cornerback options with him and Matthew McDoom as your big additions from the transfer portal. He's a guy that can make plays out of that slot position. I think would be a solid addition if they can get to that visit in the next few days. Oftentimes we see justifiably these teams want to bring guys in and get them to not leave the campus without getting a commitment. So it's gonna be full court presses for all those guys over the coming days. Overall though, Neil, we haven't seen, do you expect to see any more? I don't know if I expect to see any more, maybe a third string guy, a walk-on, 2 more of those enter the portal from Cincinnati, but I think the staff's done a solid job so far of retaining all the pieces they've wanted to retain, and I expect that to kind of continue into this new year. They've had a month plus now to make their portal decision, and you think it would have been made by this point, considering how important it is to get into the portal as quickly as possible and get your new destination picked as quickly as possible with how fast these musical chairs fill up with these programs.
Yeah, no, most certainly. I think right now Cincinnati is kind of set on guys entering the portal. I think that window is closed for them as well, because I believe you get 30 days after the season ends. So I believe that time frame is passed for most of the guys on Cincinnati to enter the portal until after spring ball. But for right now, I don't think we see anybody else enter the transfer portal until at least after spring ball ends.
There you go. That ties up the transfer portal news. We'll see if there's a commitment by the next time we talk on the show in the coming days. Arizona preview coming up, a big one at home. Do not want to fall to 0-2 in the Big 12 to start the 2025 conference campaign right here on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Stick with us. Neil, this is one of my toughest predictions I've had to make so far this season. Probably the toughest prediction for me to make, coming off of how we saw that offense look for Cincinnati against Kansas State. They've put up just 127 total points in their two toughest road games of the year, but they're back at home at Fifth Third Arena. Arizona on Saturday afternoon, 2:30 tip on ESPN2. Arizona Wildcats coming into this game 7-5 to Cincinnati's 10-2 record. It's a quad one game for both teams, as Arizona is profiling much better than a 7-5 team. 23rd net ranking this season to Cincinnati's 25th net ranking. When you look at the KenPom analytics, Arizona's been very, very strong. Top 35 nationally on offense and defensive efficiency, 16th in adjusted offensive rating, and 34th in adjusted defensive rating as the 21st KenPom team in the country. 3 spots higher than Cincinnati, who sports 58th best offensive rating in the entire country on KenPom. Need that to get way higher to reach their ceiling this year. And they have, Neil, the 5th best defense. That defense that no matter how well they're shooting, it always seems to stay locked in. Can they lock in this offense a little bit better in this contest? That's the biggest thing for me when I'm trying to project this forward, Neil, is how well can they get Simas Lukosius going, and how well can Dan Skilling's offensive rise continue for this program? Can he be a 35% three-point shooter, a 40% three-point shooter? That's probably asking too much, but low 30s, mid 30s, if he can figure out a way to hit 1 3 a game the rest of the way, or 2 or 3 threes every 4 games the rest of the way, it's really going to help that offense get to its highest mark around a defense that we know is top 5 nationally, is one of the best in the country. And it's the biggest reason why ESPN's Master Predictor has winning this game at home 53.2% of the time. Neil, offensively, can they get Simas Lukosius going? Wes Miller talked about it yesterday in his press conference. He's not worried about Simas as a shooter, more so keying in on the whole offensive around him and getting open in that offense.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Russ. And I think, as you mentioned, we heard from Wes Miller yesterday. I think everybody knows, who has been around it, seen this program. Simas Lukosius is one of the last people you have to worry about in terms of confidence, finding his groove. Because you look down, he had the 1 for 10 struggles versus Xavier last year, and he followed it up, and look how he finished the end of the year. He came off to a hot start. Everybody knew he was going to probably cool down at some point. But I said it on our Bearcat Tip-Off Talk podcast, and I'll say it again. Cincinnati has to do a better job of screening to get him open. And I think everybody can even say that. Wes Miller said it yesterday. But I think that's the biggest thing. If they can find ways to set hard screens and find ways to get him out there in some space to even get that shot off. I mean, he just had 1 shot in the second half versus Kansas State. And in your leading scorer, you got to find ways to get him open more, in terms of you got to find ways to get your best shooter more than 1 shot in the second half. So
right.
Overall, Russ, I think tomorrow is going to be the biggest matchup for Cincinnati. It's going to be a battle. But the key for me in this one, Russ, is what kind of support do we get from the students? Off campus, Wes Miller, Dylan Mitchell, even kind of both have said this is an environment where the crowd will help you win games. Wes Miller gave his plea yesterday for the fans to come out there and support. But it's going to be interesting because, Russ, if you remember last year, this game last year was versus Texas and Dylan Mitchell. Look at the crowd that showed up there. I think we're going to get a pretty big crowd, but the crowd's going to play a huge indication of how this game transpires tomorrow. And with Cincinnati opening the doors early for every weekend game now for the rest of the season, that could also play a factor as well. With the stripe out, it's going to be a fun atmosphere tomorrow, I feel like.
Right. Now, I'm sure they're opening the student section up for fans to buy those tickets, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 12:30, doors will open. I'm sure students will hopefully be packed in there, but I'm sure it's going to be a 13-5 kind of day in Fifth Third tomorrow night.
The offensive matchup here is very intriguing, Neil. This is an
Very
Arizona
intriguing.
team that funnels shots to the outside. They are more than willing, Neil, to let teams huck up threes and live or die by the outside shot against a Cincinnati team that we know can be very, very good, a very hot shooting team, and has put up some great metrics this year shooting the basketball. They are 35.7% from deep. That's one of the better marks in the country, and it's fallen down in recent weeks. They need to get up, I'd say, Neil, 25 to 33s in this game. They were not even close to that in the loss against Kansas State. They did not find their way to a lot of open shots in that game, and it just made them go to the basket a lot more. UC took a total of 19 threes in the game, hit 7. Got to likely hit 10 threes in this game to pull off a victory, in my opinion. Got to get close to 10 threes made, and it's probably going to mean you're close to 30 attempts to get that done. And you want to do it. You want to attack with shooting. You want to try to unlock Simas Lukosius. And if you can bring out one of those bigs to help on the outside, which they do not want to do in Arizona's case, then you can start to attack the interior of this defense where, Neil, they do not like giving up shots on the inside. So far this season, Arizona on the year, 33 2-point attempts allowed per game. That's 82nd best nationally. They just do not give up a lot of interior shots, and UC has to flip the math, get themselves going with their outside shot to unlock that interior action and be able to go after Arizona, a team that's allowing 26.2 3-point attempts per game. That's 324th nationally, bottom 40 nationally there. And they're allowing teams to hit 33.8% of their threes. That's 231st. You have to spam that, and you have to hit your shots in the friendly confines of Fifth Third Arena. This is a perfect matchup to hit home shots and a perfect opportunity to capitalize on your home shooting comfortability and get back to 1-1 overall. Flipping to the defensive side of things, Neil, we'll look at that after a quick break here on, actually, no, we already took our break on Bearcat Blitz. We're good to go. We got 2 in already. Defensively, you got to figure out a way to not shut down, but limit a top tier offensive threat on the other side of the ball. They haven't really been able to do that under Wes Miller. We've seen time and time again them play good overall defense to great overall defense this year, but struggle with major impact offensive players. And then that struggle ends up being the difference in a high 60s, low 70s game that they ultimately played great defense in, but allowed that great score to have way too much of an impact. And Caleb Love can do the same thing here, Neil. 3rd in the Big 12 and with 16.7 points per game, had 33 points in his last outing in their win over TCU when they put up 90 as a team. 4.3 rebounds, 3.2 assists. He's averaging 51. He's shooting 51.5% effective field goal rate this year. That's the highest mark of his entire career. You cannot let him get hot from outside, Neil. 3-point defense is imperative in this game, just like 3-point actions on the other side offensively are imperative. He's shooting 31% from deep this season on 8 attempts. If he's close to 40% in this game, it's going to be a big problem against an Arizona offense that does everything well, Neil, besides shoot the basketball well from outside. 308th nationally, shooting 30.8% from deep, and very good besides that. 58.5% 2-point mark. That's 38th in the country. 48th nationally with 23.3 free throw attempts per game. They get to the line at will, and they get to the line consistently. You cannot let them use those very strong markers of efficiency outside of 3-point shooting and add in the 3-point shooting at that. You don't expect them to allow that. They're one of the better 3-point shooting defending teams in the country. I don't have the metrics right in front of me right now, but they're top 50 in most marks on that front. And Neil, Caleb Love, you just got to figure out a way to keep them under 25 points, under 20 points. They've done a great job of limiting everybody else, but then that one-star player explodes. A Coleman Hawkins, a Zach Fremantle, a Eric Dixon. That's just to name a few this year. Not even touching on the Dylan D'Souza, who you mentioned the Texas game last year, a similar situation there where he explodes for 30-plus points and they end up losing a one-possession game. You got to find a way to limit Caleb Love and force as much pressure and usage on the other players from Arizona. I'm going Cincinnati 73-72. The closest win of the season so far.
Yeah, no, Russ, I think definitely the key to the game is how do you stop Caleb Love? I mean, he is one of maybe, if not one of the best point guards in all of college basketball. I mean, this was a guy who could have went to the league 2 years ago and has elected to stay around. But Russ, I think he's playing the best ball of his career. I think
Yeah, no doubt.
I think it's safe to say that what he is doing with Tommy Lloyd right now, it's going to be interesting. But the biggest thing for Cincinnati is this is the best backcourt Cincinnati has played, arguably all season and maybe the last 2 seasons in the Big 12. You saw that with Kansas last year, but Jaden Bradley and Caleb Love, they're a tough backcourt duo. And I mean, Jaden Bradley, another guy who's going to be an interesting matchup here. He can really facilitate the offense. He can score the ball when he needs to. But that's going to be the matchup there. I think it's going to be interesting to see Jizzle James on Jaden Bradley. I think that's going to be the matchup to watch because, Russ, let's be honest, Caleb Love's a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. It's going to be probably the Dan Skillings matchup there on Caleb Love if we had to say anything there. But it's going to be interesting.
And Dan probably taking that perimeter stopper role the rest of the year because you need Dylan. You'd rather have Dylan Mitchell, I would imagine, floating around and being a kind of like a Giannis kind of float around, shot blocker, make havoc happen all over the half court. So yeah, like that's a great note, Neil. Dan Skillings, his importance is just so huge. High for this program right now.
And that's where this could be a difference maker here, Russ, because Arizona is going to be without 7'2" center Matagius Krivas for the rest of the season. That's a huge blow for Tommy Lloyd in Arizona. So now, but I mean, thankfully for Arizona's case, just like any Big 12 team, you got another 7-footer who can step right in and fill up the role. But overall, that's a huge loss because he was one of those key guys off the bench for Arizona. And depth is a huge thing. And you look down, this, Russ, I think this could be the game where Dan Skillings makes an impact like what we saw versus Arkansas Pine Bluff, what we saw all of last season. This is the game where he's going to make an impact on the boards, I feel like. He's struggled since coming back from the knee injury, only averaging, 3-4 rebounds per game over that time span. I think this is the game where Dan Skillings has a huge impact on this one. But Caleb Love, Russ, if he has a 33-point performance on 11 to 17 shooting like he did versus TCU, it's going to be
put up 90 points. They're going to be close to 90 points if he does that for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a long day if that happens. But for Cincinnati, I think it's safe to say that Dan Skillings is your player to watch in this game, most certainly, because of all the things he is able to do. You're going to see him as that guy that's tried to stop on the wing, that 3-point perimeter defender, but the ability to alter the game on the glass is going to be huge. But like you mentioned, Russ, too, Cincinnati is going to need to knock some threes in. And you can't go 7 for whatever it was versus Kansas State with 6 of them coming from your 2 worst 3-point shooters on the team in Dan Skillings and Dylan Mitchell. They're going to have
made a combined what? I think they had made a combined 6 threes in the season.
Yeah. Might even
going
be
into the game.
Might even be lower than that. But on top of it, Day Thomas is going to have to knock some shots down. Connor Hickman's going to have to knock a couple shots down. Jizzle James is going to have to be the facilitator and the scorer in this one. They're going to have guys come around and knock some shots down to really kind of get this thing to go in this one. But, Russ, it's going to be a back-and-forth battle. I think everybody knows that. ESPN has this one favored for Cincinnati just by a slight favorite right now at that 53.2 percentage mark. But it's going to be a fun one tomorrow in Fifth Third. And, man, I'm fired up for it, Russ. You saw the atmosphere last year. But I'm right there with you. This is not going to be a game where Cincinnati or Arizona comes out and blows the doors off this thing. This is going to be one of your annual Big 12 tough, gritty, down-to-the-wire matchups. I'm going 75-73 in favor of Cincinnati.
Mid-70s showdown. We'll see if we are correct. And as I mentioned, the 3-point defense for Cincinnati, 16th best in the country, 27.7% allowed, and they're giving up just 18.7 3-point attempts per game. Cannot let that become an issue against a really bad 3-point shooting team in Arizona. And Neil, turnovers obviously have to get fixed. I think that will get fixed. That to me was just a 1-game kind of anomaly on the road, just a little lackadaisical. I don't expect to see 15 plus turnovers from this team anytime soon, considering they were giving up just 9.8 entering the game, which was top 20 nationally in the entire country. Or they were giving up less than that entering the game. They're now giving up 9.8 overall per contest at 341st, but obviously top 20 nationally when you flip those rankings. Free throws, man. It also could come down to free throws in this one. As tight a game as we are projecting, Cincinnati cannot continue to shoot 65% from the free throw line as a team and take 15 of them per game. They're too long. They're too athletic. They want to play with too much pace, and they want to get downhill, according to the staff and the mantra of this program, too often, Neil, for them to only have been taken so far this season 15 free throw attempts per game. That's 340th nationally, and they're 352nd in free throws made, 9.8 per game. That has to get closer to 12, 13, 14 made free throws per game to get these one possession, 5-point, 6-point losses flipped the other way. That's the small margins and the small deficits you're working with in such a tightly contested and tightly competitive league like the Big 12. Going to be a fun Saturday at Fifth Third Arena. Can't wait for it. Hope you all enjoyed the breakdown, and we will talk to you again next week right here on Bearcat Blitz. Happy New Year, everybody.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three.